This bowl of water here is going to represent either an ocean or perhaps the Gulf down where there's a lot of oil at the bottom of. So we're going to take our dropper with some food coloring and we will use that inside the dropper there to inject at the very bottom a pool of food coloring. That's going to represent our petroleum at the bottom of the Gulf. And so we're going to talk about, as we go and get that, the environmental consequences of obtaining and transporting and converting and using that petroleum. Here's the other materials we're going to be using in here. This is a little foil boat that I made. Just take a little square of foil and wrap it around the bottom of some round container, and then I kind of trim the edges so that they are somewhat neat looking. And then here's another dropper that I cut the stem off of. So first we're going to go and obtain that petroleum on the bottom of the ocean, still sitting there. And so we're going to go out, and I know this is not the most realistic model, but it helps kids. It's a whole lot better than just talking to them about this stuff. So pretend like this is now going to be a rig out in the middle of the ocean, and then we'll take then our dropper, which is going to actually represent the rig, and we're going to squeeze it and go down to the ocean bottom, and when we release it, it comes up with some of that petroleum. So students, let's talk about some of the things, some of the environmental consequences of obtaining crude oil from the ocean bottom or from the Gulf, and have them talk about that. Then you can put your petroleum into here, and now we need to transport it. Since we've obtained it, we're going to transport it back to land. And what are some of the environmental consequences of transporting that back over here to where the land is? Think about what could happen. It could spill, or having obtained and then transported it back to land, we're going to convert it, and that happens in a refinery. And in a refinery, they're going to have to produce at least a little bit of air pollution. That's going to be their environmental consequence. And then finally, after it comes out of there, it goes into engines as far as engine oil, and also gets formulated into gasoline, and that stuff ends up, some of it eventually as CO2, as well as some other forms of air pollution as well. What I had my students do as we did this was they took out a piece of paper and we wrote environmental consequences on the top, and I had them go ahead and before we even did all this, write those 4 things down, and as we did each one, we mentioned briefly what those environmental consequences were.